Welcome to Art. I am Miss Owens. We've met a few times virtually. I am a clinical student at EKU working with Miss Robin New to deliver you digital content this semester. We're continuing in our unit exploring artist and art vocabulary. And today I am delivering you an enrichment opportunity based on Anish Kapoor. Anish Kapoor is an artist who was born in Mumbai, India, and moved to London to study art during college. I have some quotes here from Anish Kapoor that read, "It's precisely in those moments when I don't know what to do. Boredom drives one to try a host of possibilities, to either get somewhere or not get anywhere." So his work, as we will see in the presentation, focuses a lot on scale, form, and value. Form and value are the specific art vocabulary terms that we're going to be exploring by studying Anish Kapoor. And it is our goal that you will be able to not only define the terms form and value, but you'll be able to apply your understanding of them at the end of this lesson when we create our own sculptures. Alright students, this is Anish Kapoor. Anish was born in 1952 in Bombay, which is now Mumbai, India. He is an Indian-born British sculptor who is known for his abstract biomorphic forms and his use of rich color and polished surface. Anish Kapoor would represent Britain at the Venice Biennale. He has many famous works. Among those, we will be looking at a few today. This one is called Widow. It takes up the entire room of the gallery in this exhibit. Here are two of his works. On the left, you can see it's almost as if it's an aisle beckoning you to walk towards the center. And on the right, a highly reflective and polished surface. This is another example. You can see that the form is so reflective that you're actually able to see the sky in it. After looking at a few of Anish Kapoor's pieces, I would like you all to please type in the chat what elements of art you see being used in his work. Remember, artists don't necessarily sit down and say, "I want to make a piece of art around the idea of shape or a principle of design like balance." These terms are vocabulary that artists use to talk about their work. So they will create first and then employ artistic vocabulary when discussing their work with an audience, the viewer, an article writer. So, as you think about and type in the chat what elements you see in Anish Kapoor's work, recognize that this week we'll be focusing on two. However, you may notice many of the elements of art or principles of design in his pieces. The first element of art that we will talk about is form. Form is the 3D shape that an object has. There are two types of form, traditionally speaking. One is organic. It would be like something you would see in nature. It is not necessarily a four-sided shape or three-sided shape, but has many sides, many angles, can be curved or flat in areas, straight in others, and so an organic form would also be something that looks like a human or an animal, perhaps a shape that's carved to look naturalistic. The other type is a geometric form. A geometric form would be like the cone, cube, sphere, or cylinder in the top right corner. Geometric forms are often linear in quality. They are shapes that we are familiar with, shapes that have a reliable appearance regardless of what setting we see them in. Another observable art element in Anish Kapoor's work is value. So value really just means the use of light and dark in a piece. It's often depicted in a scale like what you can see in the bottom here. I don't know if you can tell the color differences as much, but it goes from white to light gray, medium gray, and at the end black. There are an infinite number of shades between white and black that create value, but traditionally artists or scales show and use 10 different variations. a visual depiction of value is this. And so they made it into a black and white image, and they identified the areas similar lightness and darkness. And so this area here, they're saying is similar to a 6. The 8, which is this dark part on this side, would probably be closer to the 8 or at the top of the scale. And so you can identify the value, which is basically the different variations of shade in an artwork by using the scale. If we go back to some of Anish Kapoor's work, we can see, especially in this one on the right, that there are obvious areas of lightness and darkness based on the value scale. We have a lighter gray, an almost white gray. Underneath it will be darker, probably towards the top end of this scale. But we also see a lot about form. So while this in the background might be a traditional circle, perhaps a geometric form, it comes out into an organic shape as it meets the wall. So after looking at these pieces, I wanted to ask you all, what were some themes that you see in Anish Kapoor's work? And if themes is a difficult vocabulary term, it just means similarity or underlying concept, or even the use of similar design strategies. Take some time here and type those in the chat. So I'm loving the answers you all have submitted. I particularly like the two that say his work tends to be large. You're correct. These ones don't have size references, but the idea that that could be the size of a door in the background might give us the idea that it is large. This one, as we discussed, takes up an entire room. Here you can see the artist next to the work for scale, and they're monumental in size. Another aspect that you all mentioned in his work is that it tends to be shiny. A term we'll use for that is perhaps reflective. This Pringle shape here, all puns aside, is very shiny, as is this circle, which is reflecting the sky beautifully. Another work that is both large and reflective, as you all have decided are similarities among the works that I showed you, is this piece. If you all have seen this in person or have seen it online, feel free to type in the chat, perhaps unmute yourself, and during this time comment about your experience. I loved learning that some of you have visited Cloud Gate. It's humorous, many of you called it the Bean, which is a colloquial or common name for this sculpture. You can see that it is monumental in size compared to these buildings in Chicago, and it's also very reflective. I know one of you mentioned that when you visited, you got a picture of yourself reflected in the sculpture, which is actually really cool. So for our enrichment opportunity this week, we're going to be creating our own sculptures. And so I want this to be kind of open to you. We're going to try and use interesting form. We're going to work with value, but really we're just going to be sculpting. So during this time, I would like you to gather the following materials. If you have aluminum foil or Reynolds wrap, that would be incredible. It's a really easy sculpting device. It's also a common household item. You can also get white paper. However, this isn't necessary that it's a fresh piece. It could be the back of a piece of mail. It could be scrap paper. It doesn't have to be white. And then for the third one, it's interesting. You could use a photograph you have of a famous city or a city dear to your heart. You could also look at something in a book or a magazine, or you could do what I did, which is pull up a city on your computer or device. So for our first step, I want you to choose the city where your work will be displayed. Today I'm going to give you a lot of freedom in creating your sculpture. It can be any size, any shape that you want, but we are going to work with the idea of photographing our sculptures in a neat place. So Anish Kapoor's work, specifically Cloud Gate, is beautiful and large, but it's also in a beautiful setting of this big inner city. So for our sculptures, we're going to be photographing them in a pretend city. So I would like you to choose anywhere in the world. It could be Paris, France. It could be the inside of an art museum. It could be a city that you visited. It could be your hometown. But I want you to, at this time, pull up an image or pull out a photograph of a city where you would like to stage your miniature sculpture. If those aren't options for you, if you don't have the device ready to pull it up because you're working on the device, if you don't have access to a printer or a photograph, I would like you to get out a piece of paper and sketch an image of your city. So if it is just an inner city, you can sketch skyscrapers. If it is out in nature, you could sketch trees. Our second step is going to be to sketch a few ideas for your form and select the best sketch. So we're going to be constructing the sculpture from aluminum foil. I actually have a banana sculpture in front of the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I actually visited this museum and saw an album on the inside, or a record, where Andy Warhol had worked with the Velvet Underground to create the album art for their record. I thought it would be really cool if the museum had a giant banana sculpture out front. And so rather than sculpting the banana myself, I rather molded the foil around a pre-existing shape. So I really just wrapped the banana in foil and staged it on a white piece of paper that I put on my keyboard with the picture of the museum in behind. Here's another example of work that I created. It was a folded piece of aluminum foil in a geometric form, as you can remember, and I placed it in front of a picture of NASA, as if to resemble a rocket ship. It's very simplified, but I thought that it would look nice, large scale, on their property. You can also see where I manipulated the photography techniques, and so for this piece, I turned the lights low and used my flash on my camera to take the picture. So what we're going to be doing for step 2 is sketching some ideas of what your form will be like. Will you fold it like the rocket ship? Will you mold it around another shape? Will you crunch it into small pieces and then stack those pieces together? I would like for you to make a few sketches today during our independent study time or work time. And then at the end of class, you can turn your camera on or email me and we can choose the best sketch. If you've already selected a sketch or you have one good idea, you're okay to just make one drawing. But if you're not certain, feel free to make several sketches until you choose the best one. But the third step, arguably the most fun step, is the staging of your piece. And so I would like for you, once you sketch your shape, to begin forming it out of the foil and then begin to stage it. So you can make a ground using the white scrap paper that you have or gray paper. If your piece is on a road, you could take your piece outside to photograph it if you want it to be in nature. But consider what the ground of your piece would be on if it were in that city. What would the background be like? How will you achieve that effect? Will you pull it up on your computer? Will you draw the background? Do you have a photograph lying around that will work? And lastly, experiment with your photography. In the rocket ship I placed in front of NASA, I turned the lights low and tried something with flash. I want you to feel like the final piece you submit is the photograph. So your sculpture will be neat and you can keep it around your home. It's a quick exercise in sculpting, but what's going to stay and be lasting is your image. So I want you to be thoughtful with how you photograph it, how you crop it, what lighting you use, and what you do to make the illusion seem more lifelike. Lastly, I wanted to show you a copy of the rubric that we'll be using to grade this. Each section is worth 5 points. So as you're working, consider, are you understanding the vocab? Do you know what form is? Do you know what value is? Do you understand how value is used in the foil, where there's areas of lightness and darkness? Create the sculpture. You'll be graded on if you create it and complete it. I also want to see your effort and craftsmanship. So usually this would be making sure your paper is clean, making sure your name is on it, making sure you put enough time into it. But today, we're also going to be considering how you photographed your work. If you were thoughtful on where you placed your sculpture in front of your background. If you cropped it to where I couldn't see your computer screen edges, or I couldn't see the wall of your home in the background. And then finally, as always, creativity. I want to see some cool and original ideas from you all. I know there are no true original ideas that you just make up on your own, that you're always influenced by something. But the goal is that you synthesize ideas that you've seen and that you know, work by Anish Kapoor, sculptures you've seen in real life, reflective surfaces you remember, with ideas that you have. Would you like to create a giant metallic sculpture of your cat and put it outside your house? I want to see you reflected in your work.